You think trees grow from the ground. Of course you do. You plant a seed in soil. You water it. The seed sprouts. The sapling grows. Roots spread downward into the earth. The trunk thickens. Branches extend. Leaves unfurl. Year after year the tree gets bigger, taller, heavier. Eventually it becomes enormous. A mature oak can weigh 10,000 pounds. A redwood can weigh millions. Where did all that mass come from? Ask anyone. They'll say the ground, obviously. The tree is rooted in soil. It pulls nutrients from the earth. It drinks water from the ground. The mass must come from below, from the soil, from the minerals, the organic matter, the rich dirt that gardeners and farmers spend so much effort cultivating. That answer is wrong. Not a little wrong. Fundamentally wrong. The kind of wrong that reveals a deeper misunderstanding about what matter is, where it comes from, and how life actually works. A tree does not grow from the ground. Almost none of its mass comes from the soil. The dirt contributes almost nothing to the tree's physical substance. And when you understand where the mass actually comes from, when you see the mechanism clearly, you realize something unsettling about the nature of solid matter. The tree is not built from earth. It is built from air. Let me show you. Start with a simple experiment, one that was actually performed over 400 years ago by a Dutch scientist named Jan Baptist van Helmont. Van Helmont wanted to know where plant mass comes from. So he did what any good scientist does. He measured. He took a pot. He filled it with exactly 200 pounds of dry soil. He weighed it carefully. Then he planted a willow sapling in the soil. The sapling weighed 5 pounds. For 5 years he watered the tree, nothing else, no fertilizer, no additives, just water. The tree grew. After 5 years he carefully removed the tree, shook off the soil, and weighed it again. The tree now weighed 169 pounds. It had gained 164 pounds. Then he dried the soil and weighed it. The soil weighed 199.9 pounds. It had lost about 2 ounces. 2 ounces, a negligible amount. Essentially, the soil weighed the same as it did at the start. The tree gained 164 pounds. The soil lost 2 ounces. Where did the 164 pounds come from? Not from the soil. The soil barely changed. Van Helmont concluded reasonably that the mass must have come from the water. He was close. Water is part of it. But most of the tree's mass did not come from water either. It came from the air. Here is what actually happens. A tree is made mostly of wood. Wood is solid, dense, hard. You can hold it, cut it, burn it. It has mass, substance. It feels like matter in the most physical sense. What is wood made of? Chemically, wood is mostly cellulose and lignin. Both are organic polymers, long chains of molecules. And the primary element in those molecules is carbon. Carbon, the same element that forms diamonds, graphite, the backbone of every organic molecule in your body. Carbon atoms, bonded together in complex structures, make up the bulk of the tree's mass. Where does the tree get carbon? From the air. The atmosphere is about 0.04% carbon dioxide, CO2, a gas, invisible, odorless. You exhale it with every breath. And plants, trees included, pull it out of the air. They do this through tiny pores in their leaves called stomata. The stomata open, air diffuses in, and the tree absorbs CO2. Then, inside the leaf, something remarkable happens. Photosynthesis. Light from the sun strikes chlorophyll molecules in the leaf. The energy from that light is used to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released back into the air. That's the oxygen you breathe. It is waste from the plant's perspective. The hydrogen is combined with carbon dioxide in a series of chemical reactions to produce glucose, C6H12O06, a simple sugar, and glucose is the building block. Glucose molecules are linked together to form cellulose. Cellulose fibers are woven into the structure of wood. Lignin, a more complex polymer, reinforces the structure, making it rigid. But let's be precise about what is actually happening here, because the simplicity of the word photosynthesis hides something profound. A photon, a particle of light, travels 93 million miles from the sun. It took 8 minutes to get here, moving at 186,000 miles per second. That photon carries energy, not much. A single photon in visible light carries about 3 electron volts of energy. Tiny, negligible. But trillions of photons hit a single leaf every second. And inside the leaf, inside the chloroplasts, inside the thylakoid membranes, those photons strike molecules of chlorophyll. The energy is absorbed. An electron in the chlorophyll molecule gets excited to a higher energy state. That excited electron does not stay excited. It cannot. The energy has to go somewhere. And where it goes is into chemistry. The electron passes through a chain of molecules, an electron transport chain. And at each step, energy is used to do work, to pump protons, to create a concentration gradient, to drive the synthesis of ATP, the energy currency of the cell. Meanwhile, the energy from the photon is also being used to split water. H2O becomes hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen is released. The hydrogen, in the form of protons and electrons, is used in the Calvin cycle to reduce carbon dioxide into glucose. This is not magic. This is physics. Electromagnetic energy is being converted into chemical energy. The energy carried by photons is being stored in the bonds of glucose molecules, and glucose is just stored sunlight, energy in molecular form. The tree is building itself, molecule by molecule, out of carbon pulled from the air and energy pulled from the sun. That 10,000-pound oak tree, most of that mass is carbon, and that carbon came from CO2 in the atmosphere. The tree did not pull it from the ground, it pulled it from the air. You are looking at solidified air, literally. The trunk, the branches, the leaves, all of it is carbon that was floating in the atmosphere as gas and is now locked into solid form. The tree is a sculpture made of air. Now think about what this means. You walk through a forest. Massive trees surround you, trunks several feet thick, branches spreading overhead, tons of wood, solid, tangible, physical. None of that came from the ground. Almost all of it came from the air, from an invisible gas that makes up less than 1/20th of 1% of the atmosphere. The tree pulled carbon dioxide out of the air, molecule by molecule, year after year, and assembled it into structure, into mass, into the thing you see standing in front of you. This should change how you see the world. The solid matter around you, the physical substance you think of as real and permanent, is mostly just rearranged gas. Carbon that was floating freely in the atmosphere and is now temporarily locked into a form you can touch. And it is temporary. When the tree dies, when it rots or burns, the carbon returns to the atmosphere. The cycle reverses. The solid becomes gas again. The mass disappears back into the air. Nothing was created. Nothing is destroyed. Carbon just moves from air to tree, from tree to air, a cycle, continuous, invisible. But let's go deeper. Let's ask the next question. Where did the energy come from? Building a tree requires energy, enormous amounts of energy. You are taking low-energy molecules, CO2 and H2O, and turning them into high-energy molecules, glucose and cellulose. That requires work, energy input. Where does that energy come from? The sun. Photosynthesis is not just a chemical reaction. It is an energy conversion process. Electromagnetic radiation from the sun, photons traveling at the speed of light across 93 million miles of empty space, strike the surface of a leaf. Those photons carry energy. When they hit a chlorophyll molecule, the energy is absorbed. That energy breaks chemical bonds. It splits water molecules. It drives the reactions that combine hydrogen and carbon dioxide into glucose. The energy is stored in the chemical bonds of the glucose molecule. Later, when the tree needs energy to grow, to build new cells, to repair damage, it breaks down glucose. The energy stored in those bonds is released and used. So the tree is not just made of air, it is made of sunlight. The energy that holds the structure together, the energy that was used to pull carbon out of the air and assemble it into wood, came from the sun. A tree is solidified sunlight, frozen solar radiation, photons that fell on leaves years ago, converted into chemical bonds, stored as structure. When you hold a piece of wood, you are holding sunlight, literally. The energy in the chemical bonds of the cellulose came from photons emitted by nuclear fusion reactions in the sun's core. That energy traveled through space, was captured by a leaf, and is now stored in the wood. And when you burn that wood, the energy is released. The chemical bonds break. The carbon recombines with oxygen, forming CO2 again. The energy stored as chemical bonds is released as heat and light. Fire is just sunlight, delayed. The glow of the flame is the same energy that fell on a leaf 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago, finally being released. You are not burning wood. You are releasing stored sunlight. Now let's talk about what happens to the carbon after you burn the wood. The wood burns. The carbon combines with oxygen from the air. CO2 is released. It rises, mixes with the atmosphere, spreads globally. That CO2 does not disappear. It does not vanish into nothing. It circulates. Wind carries it. Eventually, it reaches another tree. That tree absorbs it, uses it to build new wood. The carbon that was part of the oak in your fireplace might become part of a pine tree in a forest 1,000 miles away. The carbon cycles. Air to tree to air to tree again, over and over, continuously. And this is not a modern process. This has been happening for hundreds of millions of years. The carbon in the tree outside your window has cycled through countless organisms. It was part of ancient ferns in the Carboniferous period. It was part of dinosaurs. It was part of mammoths. It was floating free in the atmosphere, then locked into plant matter, then released, then locked again. The same atoms, recycled, endlessly. Nothing is new. The carbon in a tree today is the same carbon that has been on Earth for billions of years. It just keeps moving, from form to form, from gas to solid, from living to non-living, from atmosphere to biosphere and back. You are surrounded by recycled matter. Every tree, every plant, every blade of grass, all of it is made from carbon that has been used and reused countless times. And here is something that should make you pause. When you breathe out, you exhale carbon dioxide. That CO2 came from the food you ate. The food was built from carbon that came from the air. You broke it down, extracted the energy, and exhaled the carbon back into the atmosphere. That exhaled CO2 does not disappear. It mixes with the air. It spreads. And eventually, some of it will be absorbed by a plant, maybe a tree in your yard, maybe a blade of grass 1,000 miles away. That plant will use the carbon to build new tissue, new leaves, new roots. The carbon you exhaled might become part of an apple. Someone eats the apple. The carbon enters their body. They exhale it. It cycles again. You are not separate from the biosphere. You are part of it. The carbon you exhale today might be part of a tree tomorrow. The carbon in the salad you ate for lunch was floating in the atmosphere last year. You are exchanging matter with the environment constantly, every breath, every meal. The boundary between you and the world is not as clear as it seems. You are not a closed system. You are an open system. Matter flows through you. Carbon in, carbon out, water in, water out. You are a temporary arrangement of atoms that came from the environment and will return to the environment. There is no you and the world. There is only the world, temporarily organized into a pattern you call yourself. Now let's extend this to you. Your body is about 18% carbon by mass. If you weigh 150 pounds, roughly 27 pounds of you is carbon. Where did that carbon come from? You ate food. The food was plants or animals that ate plants. The plants pulled carbon from the air. So the carbon in your body came from the atmosphere. The same place the tree got it, you are made of air. Just like the tree. The carbon in your bones, your muscles, your DNA was floating in the atmosphere as CO2 until recently. A plant absorbed it. You ate the plant, or you ate something that ate the plant. The carbon was incorporated into your cells. The calcium in your bones came from the ground, yes. Some minerals, some trace elements, those came from soil, from water. But the bulk of your body's mass, the organic molecules that make up your cells, came from the air. You are not made of earth. You are made of rearranged atmosphere. And when you die, when your body decomposes, the carbon returns to the air. Your atoms disperse. They become part of the atmosphere again. Some of them might be absorbed by a tree, built into wood, burned in a fire, released again. The cycle continues. Your atoms are not yours. They are borrowed, temporarily assembled into the pattern you call yourself. And when that pattern dissolves, the atoms return to the pool. Here is the part that should disturb you. Solid matter is not solid in the way you think it is. You see a tree. It looks permanent, stable, fixed in place. But the tree is not a static object. It is a process, a flow. Carbon flowing from air into structure, held temporarily, then released back into air. The tree you see today is not the same tree that was there 10 years ago. Not in the sense of being made of the same atoms. The atoms have been replaced. Old cells die. New cells grow. Carbon is constantly being added from the air and lost through respiration and decay. The tree is more like a river than a rock, a pattern that persists while the substance flows through it, and this is true for you too. The atoms in your body are replaced over time. Carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen, all of them cycle in and out. The pattern persists. The structure remains recognizable, but the matter itself is temporary. You are not a thing. You are a pattern, a stable configuration of matter that persists for a while and then dissolves. And the matter that makes up that pattern is not special. It is the same matter that makes up trees, grass, soil, air, the same atoms, the same elements, just arranged differently. There is no fundamental distinction between you and a tree. Both are temporary arrangements of atoms pulled from the environment. Both are processes, not objects. Both will dissolve back into the environment when the process stops. Now let's go back to the original question. Where does a tree's mass come from? From the air, from carbon dioxide, from the atmosphere. But that raises another question. Where did the carbon in the atmosphere come from? Originally from volcanic outgassing. When the Earth was young, volcanoes released gases, including CO2, from the planet's interior. That carbon has been cycling through the biosphere ever since. But there is more. Some of the carbon in the atmosphere today came from burning fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas. Those fuels are the remains of ancient plants and plankton that lived hundreds of millions of years ago. They pulled carbon from the atmosphere. They died. They were buried. Over millions of years, heat and pressure turned them into coal and oil. When you burn fossil fuels, you are releasing carbon that was locked away for hundreds of millions of years. You are putting it back into the atmosphere. And that carbon is now available for trees to absorb, to build new wood. So some of the carbon in trees today came from plants that lived in the Carboniferous period 300 million years ago. It was locked into coal, buried underground, extracted, burned, released as CO2, and absorbed by a modern tree. The carbon is ancient. It cycles through forms over geological timescales. And the tree, the solid object you see, is just one temporary form in that endless cycle. But here is what makes this even stranger. The carbon itself is far older than the Earth. Carbon was not created on this planet, it was created in stars. Inside the core of a massive star, nuclear fusion occurs. Hydrogen fuses into helium. Helium fuses into carbon. This process requires enormous temperatures and pressures, millions of degrees, densities far beyond anything we can create on Earth. When the star exhausts its fuel, it explodes as a supernova. The explosion scatters the carbon, along with other heavy elements, into space. That carbon drifts through the galaxy. Eventually, some of it clumps together with other material to form a new star, new planets. The carbon in your body, the carbon in the tree outside your window, was forged in the core of a star that exploded billions of years ago. It drifted through space for eons. It coalesced into the molecular cloud that formed our solar system. It became part of the Earth. It cycled through volcanoes, oceans, atmosphere, biosphere, and now it is here, temporarily, in you, in the tree, in the air. You are made of stardust, not metaphorically, literally. The atoms in your body were created in stellar furnaces and scattered across the galaxy by supernova explosions. You are the universe, rearranged into a pattern that can look back at itself and ask where it came from. The tree is the same. Stardust organized into cellulose and lignin. Ancient atoms briefly solid, eventually gas again. Here is what you are left with. A tree does not grow from the ground, it grows from the air. The mass of the tree, the physical substance, the wood, the leaves, the branches, all of it is made of carbon pulled from the atmosphere. Water contributes. Minerals from the soil contribute. But they are minor. The bulk of the tree's mass is carbon, and that carbon came from CO2. The energy to build the tree came from the sun. Photons from nuclear fusion reactions in the sun's core, traveling across space, captured by chlorophyll, converted into chemical bonds. The tree is solidified air and sunlight, a sculpture made of invisible gas and electromagnetic radiation, assembled molecule by molecule over years or decades or centuries. And this is not unique to trees. All plants do this. Grass, flowers, crops, algae. All of them pull carbon from the air and build themselves from it. The biosphere, the entire living world, is made mostly of rearranged atmosphere. Life does not grow from the ground. It grows from the air, from the invisible gases that surround you. And you are part of that process. The carbon in your body came from the air. The energy in your cells came from the sun, passed through plants, passed through animals, and ended up in you. You are made of the same substance as trees. Rearranged air, sunlight stored in chemical bonds, atoms borrowed from the environment, assembled temporarily into a pattern, and destined to return. This is not metaphor. This is chemistry. This is physics. This is what matter actually is. The solid world you see around you is mostly empty space and rearranged gas. The tree outside your window is a temporary sculpture of carbon pulled from the air, and when it falls, when it decays or burns, the carbon returns to the atmosphere. Nothing is permanent, everything is flow. Matter cycles, energy flows, patterns emerge, persist, and dissolve. The tree is not separate from the air. It is part of the air, temporarily solid, eventually gas again. And so are you, not because of mysticism, because of chemistry. You think trees grow from the ground because you see roots in soil, but the roots are for water and stability. The mass comes from above, from the atmosphere, from the invisible gas you walk through every day without thinking. The tree is not rooted in earth, it is rooted in air. And that changes everything about how you see the world. Reality does not care what seems obvious. It only cares what is true. And the truth is that solid matter is just rearranged gas, held together temporarily by energy from the sun. The tree did not come from the ground. It came from the sky.